What's going on, my cool cats and kittens? It is your boy Dustywhy back again, but today we are not going to be pumping any clumps. I'm going to be showing you guys what makes this build work behind the scenes. We're going to be going through the perks that are currently on my armor set, as well as where I want to take my armor set as the season continues to progress. We're also going to look into my weapon ability trees, and we're going to cover this whole build for you guys. So stay tuned. We're going to be looking over at my Marama character, Dustywhy, with the 1Y, which is over in minus 15k's main roster. So if you guys are interested in this build, stick with me and make sure you like, comment, and subscribe so we can get this build guide out to more people and spread the good word of Mitigation Nation.
Oh my god, it's a massacre! It's a massacre!
Alright, so let's hop right into it here. So not only is this set going to be one of the drippiest in New World, but in my opinion, this is also going to be one of the tankiest options that you can run for your loadout. First things first, even though I am on point, we're still going to be medium armor believers coming in at 22.9. To make this work with our armor weights, we're going to be wearing a heavy chest, heavy legs, light helm, medium gloves, and light boots. Your boots, your gloves, and your helm are all interchangeable in the weights, so you need 2 of them to be light and 1 of them to be medium with this loadout. For my weapons, I believe that Refreshing Move and Enfeebling Maelstrom is the 2 perk that you want the most. I added on Keen because I got this for 1,000 gold. I will develop on this a little bit later in the season. For my full BIS weapon, I'm going to be looking to replace the Keen with Thwarting Counter. The reason for Thwarting Counter over Thwarting Strikes this season is if you're playing on clump or on point specifically like I am, you're mostly going to be fighting people who have grit active, especially during large collapses. Thwarting Strikes caps out at 7% due to the changes, and Thwarting Counter gives you 22% increased damage against enemies that have grit. So this is a really good option to almost triple your damage output from 1 perk. For the hammer, same thing, we're going to be basically running a 2 perk here. Plague Strikes and Trenchant Strikes is, yet again in my opinion, the best 2 perk hammer that you can run. If I had unlimited money, I would either add on an Attune, a Keenly Jagged, or Sundering Shockwave as this 3rd perk. Since I do not have Sundering Shockwave on my hammer, we want to make a point to have that on our armor, just because that is going to be such a big piece for us. Looking at the armor itself, I like to break up the armor into 3 sets of 5 perks. The first set that we're going to be looking at is my Ward. Ward is going to be a new mechanic that came into the game this season for PvP that is featuring Grit Ward and Enchanted Ward as the top 2 popular options for Bruisers. Enchanted Ward is going to reduce the damage that you take from light and heavy attacks. As you can see here, I don't have my Enchanted Ward on my Freedom Pants yet. We'll get that in the war. But with Enchanted Ward, you'll get a little bit of reduction against light and heavy attacks. This covers basics, but it will not cover any actual ability damage. As a Bruiser, we're going to encounter a good mix of basic attack and ability damage on point, especially coming from detonates and grav combos. To counteract that, we're going to work in a lot of Grit Ward. Grit Ward is, in my opinion, the best type of ward for Bruisers, since you should pretty much always be left clicking. So for my first set of 5 perks, we're going to be running 4 Grit Ward, 1 Enchanted Ward, and that's going to cover our wards. For our second set of perks, this is where you can start to get a little bit of adaptability and customization in your builds. I like to run Conditioning. I'm not currently running Shirking Heals technology, although I am running Ankh. So I believe that with Conditioning, you can essentially become so tanky that you're going to mitigate the damage that you would heal, and this is also going to adapt better for big spikes of damage, where Shirking Heals may be on that 5-second internal cooldown. Your Conditioning will always give you active reduction. So for my Conditioning currently, on my boots, we have Grit Ward Strike Conditioning. My gloves have Grit Ward Strike Conditioning. My chest has Grit Ward Strike Conditioning. And you guessed it, my helm has Grit Ward Strike Conditioning. My pants will eventually have Enchanted Ward and Slash Conditioning as the last 2. In an ideal scenario, I would be switching out one of my strike conditionings for a slash conditioning. And with that 3 and 2, I would be getting 12% additional strike protection and 8% additional slash. With my current resistances, due to the meta, I'm at 22.5 slash, 7.5 strike, 7.5 thrust, 10% to all elements, but 16% to arcane. To take you through a couple of the benefits and the why of these resistances, we're going to incorporate our conditioning coming in again. Currently, with the 4 slots of strike conditioning, I'm going to be gaining 16% strike mitigation, which is going to bring me up to 23.5 strike damage resistance in clumps. Even adding on 1 slash conditioning, I'll be sitting at 26.5% slash resistance. And between my arcane damage resistance from slotting 1 arcane ward in my Ankh and running arcane potions on point, I'll be sitting at 31% arcane damage resistance. These are going to be the 3 primary types of damage that we're taking on point, and we're mitigating all of them by 25% or more before any other forms of mitigation come into play. For our third set of 5 armor perks after conditioning, we have what I like to call the utility perks. Utility perks can either be your freedom, your invigorated, your shirking heals, or your weapon perks that you don't have on your weapons themselves. I'm a firm believer that this build functions on 3 weapon perks: Insatiable Gravity Well, which is on your armor, Sundering Shockwave, which is on your armor or your weapon, and Enfeebling Maelstrom, which is always on your weapon. Between these 3, you're going to be self-healing, increasing your damage output with Gravwell. You're going to be doing a 10% Sunder, reducing all armor by 10% with everything you hit from your Shockwave. And you'll be weakening everything you hit with your Maelstrom by 27%. These are going to be some large debuffs and buffs for yourself to put out to ensure that you're surviving in the clump and having impact in those clumps. In terms of my third set of 5s, I'm going to be running Insatiable Gravwell on my boots, bringing those to Gritwort, Strike Con, Insatiable Grav. I'll have Freedom on my Freedom Pants, which, as you can see, we do actually have that unlocked currently. We run Freedom on my gloves, and between my Freedom Pants and my Freedom on my gloves, we're going to have the equivalent of 4 Old Freedom minus 4%. So pretty interchangeable there. 4 Freedom was the breakpoint that a lot of melee players love to get to, where it felt really smooth. So I'm sitting there and I really enjoy the Freedom feel. On my chest piece, we have a slot of Vigor. This is going to be slightly less than ideal, but we'll switch this out as we go. This chest piece is just kind of a 2-perk placeholder for right now. On my helm, we have Sundering Shockwave. This helm is going to last me a long time. Between the helm and the boots, I believe those are 2 fantastic pieces, and I actually found these on the trading post for a combined 20,000 gold. So there is a really good chance for you to still earn some really good pieces for some great deals out there if you pay attention at the right times. On the jewelry end of the spectrum, we do have a couple different options. As of right now, I'm currently running the classic Ankh. I've opted for slash protection on my Ankh for that extra 15%. I do not currently run with stamina recovery because we do get a baby stamina recovery in the Great Axe tree. I've upgraded my Champions Ring on all 3 of my servers. This is going to give me Keen Awareness, Hardy, and Invigorated Punishment, as well as the 32 attribute points. I still believe Keen Awareness and slash damage are pretty interchangeable, especially because, from a slash damage perspective, if you're using your Great Axe in a war setting, you should be cleansing all of your combinations anyways, so that slash damage won't really count towards your Empower cap. For the earring, we have a ton of different options here. I'm currently running Refreshing Toast, Nimble, which is the 2 perk of choice right now. I've added on Purifying Toast as my 3rd perk because, again, I got it for 1,000 gold. You can't really beat that. Purifying Toast, I do still believe is quite nice with all of these debuffs going out. It did take a little bit of a shadow nerf with players switching to regeneration serums, but it is still very viable over the course of a war, especially considering you're using 3 potions and then your cleanse, which takes off all of your debuffs anyways. For our attribute split, we're going to be staying with a pretty traditional 250 strength, 350 constitution split here. The goal with the 350 constitution will be to maintain that extra 10% damage reduction while I have active grit. That's going to play on top of my grit ward to allow me to sustain a ton of damage in these clumps on point. I'm also going to look for 250 strength, which is going to give me 33% stamina regen while performing basic melees. This is going to allow me to not only sustain a lot of damage, but also keep my dodges up without exhausting myself, which, as we know with the Bruiser mentality, if you exhaust yourself on point, you are pretty much a free kill. So this will help me watch my stamina just a little bit more and make sure that everything stays nice and smooth in those clumps. For my point great axe tree, which is going to be the one that I'm including in this build, since this is the primary role that I'm playing this patch, we're going to be looking at a pretty traditional layout here. Greed to get the 3 stacks of Empower for 5% each when we're light attacking, up to 15% Empower. Death's Embrace gives us a little bit of armor penetration, 10% against foes below 50% health. Critical gains every time we crit with our great axe. It's going to heal us for 10% of our damage done, which is really nice over the course of these clumps. Keen Edge, which is going to increase our critical damage for 10%. This did get a nice little buff with the changes to, not being able to fully stack Resilient on your armor. People are now running, if they're medium armor, the equivalent of 4 Resilient, whereas some Bruisers were previously running 5. So a nice little sneaky buff to that as well. Frustration is going to be the main variable as a point Bruiser that you'll switch out if you're not on point. With Frustration, whenever your attacks are blocked, you gain a stack of 15% damage for 10 seconds, which is just a really nice way to get some extra Empower up if you're swinging with the Great Axe out and taking advantage of your Refreshing Move perk. For our last perk on the Reaper side of the tree, in terms of a passive, we'll take Critical Condition. Great Axe attacks against foes below 30% health have 15% increased crit chance. That's going to combine with Keen Edge, as well as our critical gains to give us a nice little spurt of damage and healing on everything that we're hitting that's going to be below 30% HP. We'll take the one-off perk in charge, since the bottom 2 are not really worth getting. It gets you 20% extra damage, and you get to left-click to end your attack, or right-click, but you can already left-click to end your charge, so not really a big thing there. On the Mauler side of the tree, Mauler's Resolve is essentially a baby stamina recovery for us. We'll take all 4 of our perks in Maelstrom. Enduring Strike is going to give us a 12% damage reduction while Grit's active. We'll take our Gravity Well with both of the perks underneath, increasing burst damage and giving a little bit of a Fortify. We'll grab Crowded Protection, as well as Center of Attention, which are both going to be a damage and an armor buff, while there are 3 or more enemies within 4 meters, and which, as we know, as a Bruiser, you're pretty much always going to have 3 or more enemies within 4 meters. Last but not least, we take our Mauler's Fury, which is going to be the big facilitator for our Empower stacks as a Bruiser. You swing a couple times, you hit with an ability, and you get up to those 10 stacks, and you're carrying a 30% Empower for 3 seconds at a time. Alright, and a look over for my Bonky boys at the Hammer Tree right now. We've switched off of Wrecking Ball and back onto Armor Breaker. Armor Breaker is going to give us a couple wonderful perks here, not only penetrating 35% of armor, but also getting Grit and inflicting a 30% rend on targets, which in this meta where everything is super tanky, this is going to be absolutely massive. Coming over to Hammer Time, this is going to work on half heavies and full heavies, but half heavies are really a point of emphasis for Bruisers this patch with the hammer. On those half heavies, you'll get a 20% empowered lasting for 4 seconds. Also during those half heavies, you'll take 12% reduced damage because of your Grit, thanks to Hardened Steel. Heading over to Exhaustive Attacks. All Warhammer abilities apply Exhaust, slowing target stamina regen by 20% for 5 seconds. This is nice because it puts a 5-second debuff up on your target and slows that stam regen, leading to more Bruisers stamming themselves and becoming sitting ducks on point. Quick Recovery, which is quite possibly one of the best single passive points in the entire game. Heavy attacks that hit reduce cooldowns by 7%, and this has a max of 5 reductions per attack, totaling 35% cooldown reduction from a single attack. This is extremely, extremely strong. Power Through Pain is a 35% empower for 1 second after taking damage, and if you're in a clump, you are always keeping that up. Outnumbered is going to give you 20% increased armor, as long as there are 2 or more enemies within 3 meters. Acceleration is another one of those big cooldown reduction nodes. Reduce Warhammer cooldowns by 7% when using light attacks against targets with an active debuff. with a max of 5 reductions per attack, yet again totaling up to 35% per attack. Concussive Impact, you deal 15% increased damage against targets affected by any Warhammer debuff. Prevailing Spirit's going to heal you for 35% of the damage dealt by any of your Crowd Crusher abilities, Shockwave, and Path of Destiny. Aftershock is going to put up another 4-second debuff anytime someone is affected by a crowd control effect, and that's going to slow them for 20 seconds. We take our 3 perks in Shockwave and our 3 perks in Path of Destiny, and that's going to round out the Hammer tree. And in my opinion right now, Hammer is the strongest that it has ever been. The damage from Armor Breaker is absolutely remarkable, and with the animation lock being added to the end of Wrecking Ball, making it a little bit clunkier to play, and the lack of damage on Wrecking Ball, I've been very comfortable making the switch over to AB. So be sure to let me know what you guys are running and what you think right now. All right, you boys wanted it. You got it. We've covered every aspect of my build here. And at the end of the season, we're going to add a couple more pieces of armor. But for the most part, this is just going to stay the same. Develop maybe a perk or two differently. I think for the most part, we've hit this meta right on the head with what we're looking to mitigate, what we're looking to play like. And if you guys are looking to see more of the content, see the build in action, make sure you stop by twitch.tv/Dustywhy, where I am live 7 nights a week with New World content. I've got multiple wars most nights, and I'm going to be bruising until they tell me I can't anymore. I appreciate you guys checking out the build guide. If you have any questions, leave them down below in a comment. And as always, like and subscribe here. Pop on over to the Twitch and drop a follow there so you guys can stay tuned on all of my content as soon as it comes out.